So good morning, everyone. It's so good to be here. I can't, speaking of this past year and what a challenge it's been, I can really hardly believe it's time for another new year. And in a year for me, when every day seemed just about the same, and I never knew what day it was, I kind of had to um, look at my computer or my phone every day to know what day it was. So it's just here we are again on the verge of a new year. And I think we're all looking forward to this being a as someone just said, a freer year so that we can touch base again with the people we love and actually be in the same room with them. And I'm really looking forward to that. So this month, you all have been talking about plenty, as Betty said. And when I hear the word plenty, I always think of the phrase more than enough. But unfortunately, it's sad to say, but it seems to be true that we spend most of our hours in our days hearing, thinking, complaining, and worrying about what we don't have rather than feeling like we have more than enough. It occupies an inordinate amount of our time and our thoughts, which, by the way, we don't seem to have enough of. Time, that is. We seem to have plenty of thoughts. The studies say that we average over 6,000 thoughts per day. But in the category of not enough, we complain about work and money and power, not pretty or handsome enough, not thin enough, not fit enough, not educated enough, not experienced enough. The list just goes on and on. We focus a lot on what we don't have enough of. But in her book, The Soul of Money, author Lynn Twist talks about reclaiming the wealth of our inner resources and about how much time we spend feeling inadequate and behind. And so this book, The Soul of Money, is a great book. If you haven't read it, I invite you to do so. We're just going to barely touch the surface of it this morning, but it has lots of original thinking about prosperity in it. Twist says that our search for prosperity is really all about scarcity and sufficiency. And I'll tell you a little more about just what she means by these two concepts. With regard to scarcity and sufficiency, she claims that there is both a great lie and a surprising truth that we have to deal with while testing our relationship with abundance and prosperity. These are not merely theories for her. Lynn Twist has spent more than 40 years as a recognized global visionary who has committed herself to alleviating poverty, ending world hunger, and supporting social justice and environmental sustainability. And the more she worked with these issues and the people involved with them, the more she saw that there is a fundamental assumption of scarcity, which is pretty much universal in the world. Within the attitude of scarcity, there are, she says, three toxic myths that help to create a you or me world. And in this time of isolation and social distancing, it's compounded to the extreme. This idea of it's you or me, or there's a win-lose mentality rather than a win-win type of living. So the first of these toxic myths she names is there's not enough. The myth that there's not enough. This myth frequently defines our reason for working and being. And in this you or me world, there is not enough food, water, or air, land, money, or time. It doesn't matter the financial circumstances. Poor people feel like they will never have the basics. And rich people always seem to need more. No amount is enough, and they're afraid of losing what they have. In this mindset, we accept that some people will not have what they need, and it becomes okay. So greed and hoarding flourish, perpetuating the law of scarcity. The second toxic myth is more is better. This is about an unending race to grab more and as much as we can, and to be better than, and always judging everyone by the external, by what they own, what they wear, how they look. It's all about material belongings and worth, and nothing about the inner self. And the third toxic myth is the idea of that's just the way it is. This is taking a stance of being hopeless, helpless, and cynical, and believing that it's just the way it is invites all kinds of negative thinking and living. So you see how the belief in scarcity, with its toxic myths of there's not enough, more is better, and it's just the way it is, create a you or me world where greed, hoarding, prejudice, judgment, and hopelessness are running rampant. Let me refer you to the example of the toilet paper shortages of this pandemic era. I think that we can assume that people are generally not using any more or less toilet paper than they were prior to 2020. You need what you need for the number of folks in your household over a certain period of time. Toilet paper manufacturers are used to this being a really good selling product, which tends to be a pretty stable product, and have adapted to supply pretty much of a regular amount of toilet paper that meets the needs of everyone who needs it. When people suddenly, overnight it seems, started clearing the grocery shelves of toilet paper, it wasn't because they actually needed more toilet paper. It was because they were afraid for some reason that the next toilet paper wasn't going to be there when they needed it. So what did they do? They ran out and piled as much toilet paper in their cars as they could and carried it home. Then here comes the rest of us who didn't wish to do that, who now suddenly really do have a shortage, no toilet paper next time we need it. And where did we get it? Well, in my case, it was at least a couple of months before I acquired any at a store due to the empty shelves. I got it first by raiding my next door neighbor's storage closet because I watch his condo most of the year while he lives full-time in Switzerland. And knowing I could replace it before he visited the next time, I just grabbed what he had. After that, I got it from my friends who were concerned enough to ask if I needed any and brought it to my doorstep when I needed it. This could have conceivably been any one product. A few things really were temporarily short as markets caught up with the demand. But as I understand it, never really toilet paper. It was just a distribution and hoarding issue. So you can see why Lynn Twist says that this notion of universal scarcity is the great lie I mentioned at the beginning. There really is enough of just about everything in the world. We just have to distribute it sensibly and care and use it caringly. And then she says there is the surprising truth which counteracts scarcity, and that's the concept of sufficiency. So you may not have heard of this concept. Simply, if scarcity is about a you or me world, sufficiency is about a you and me world. Sufficiency is the idea, as described by Lynn Twist, that when you let go of trying to get more and more of what you don't really need, It frees up oceans of energy to make a difference with what you already have. When you make a difference with what you have, it expands. What if instead of seeking more, you really, really treasure and take thoughtful care of what you have? We talk about this kind of thing a lot in Unity, but if you're like me, you haven't always completely arrived at that way of thinking. Sufficiency is not an amount, it's an experience, a knowing that there is enough and that we are enough. It lives within us. It is what Eric Butterworth and Charles Fillmore called substance. Charles Fillmore taught that everything is made of God substance, God stuff, and it's all good stuff. And Butterworth said that the only way to live in the flow of life is to acknowledge that there is always enough. If you live in an attitude of lack and not having all you need, or if you're afraid you'll lose what you do have, you are instantly out of the flow of spirit and out of the flow of life. So living in sufficiency, in an attitude of sufficiency, brings about a natural freedom and integrity. This will transform your relationship with money, with spirit, and with your life. Lynn Twist says we seem to breeze right past enough most of the time, as if it weren't even there. And that better is not having more, but it's deepening our experience of what's already there. And once you're in that feeling of appreciating and appropriately using the resources you have, there may be materially more for you, but it won't really matter because the thing we're really looking for is that wonderful sense of sufficiency that frees us from the battles of grabbing more and more, which brings hope and joy and contentment to a life that does enjoy plenty. We affirm that we have what we need, not that it's disappearing, and we don't have to save it. It inspires sharing, collaboration, and contribution. What would a you and me world look like? Well, there would be enough food, water, land, and housing, fundamental needs met, fulfilling and productive lives, and enough substance for all. And this you and me world exists already within us with our inner substance and our inner knowing that there is enough. This is Lynn's Twist quote on how to live in a state of sufficiency. This isn't an exact verbatim quote from her book, but it came from an article that she wrote in which she was summarizing her book. And I just wanted to share it with you because there's no way that I could paraphrase it any better than she has said it here. We each have the choice in any setting to step back and let go of the mindset of scarcity. Once we let go of scarcity, we discover the surprising truth of sufficiency. By sufficiency, I don't mean a quantity of anything. Sufficiency isn't 2 steps up from poverty or 1 step short of abundance. It isn't a measure of barely enough or more than enough. Sufficiency isn't an amount at all. It is an experience, a context we generate, a declaration, a knowing that there is enough and that we are enough. In our relationship with money, it is using money in a way that expresses our integrity, using in a way that expresses value rather than determines value. Sufficiency is not a message about simplicity or about cutting back and lowering expectations. Sufficiency doesn't mean we shouldn't strive or aspire. Sufficiency is an act of generating, distinguishing, making known to ourselves the power and presence of our existing resources and our inner resources. Sufficiency is a context we bring forth from within that reminds us that we look around us and within ourselves, we will find what we need. There is always enough. I am not suggesting that there is ample water in the desert or food for the beggars in Bombay. I am saying that even in the presence of genuine scarcity of external resources, the desire and capacity for self-sufficiency are innate and enough to meet the challenges we face. It is precisely when we turn our attentions to these inner resources, in fact, only when we do that, that we can begin to see more clearly the sufficiency in us and available to us, and we can begin to generate effective, sustainable responses to whatever limitations of resources confront us. When we let go of the chase for more and consciously examine and experience the resources we already have, we discover our resources are deeper than we knew or imagined. In the nourishment of our attention, our assets expand and grow. That's Lynn Twist from The Soul of Money. So plenty, prosperity, and abundance are not just about money. Of course, we know that in Unity, but they are a lot about money because how we relate to our money tends to determine what we believe about our prosperity. And what we believe about our prosperity ultimately is our prosperity. So my story about my journey and my search for prosperity is probably like many of yours. There have been many ups and downs in my life. And there have been many challenges as I try to move from just enough, just in time, to more than enough. So the search for prosperity is an inner adventure. And it has only been recently, I'd say within the last couple of years, that I finally grasped this idea of sufficiency. I've always believed that there's enough, that I will always have what I need. And I have indeed always had what I need. But for long periods of time in my life, I just kind of came to a plateau of just enough, just in time. And if you move through just enough, just in time for a long enough period of time, say years, which I have done, it's exhausting. It's really tiring to always be just on the brink of not having enough. And it took me a long time to realize it was all in my inner thought process that made all the difference. I really did believe that there's plenty out there, but I somehow couldn't figure out how to tap into it. But last year at a retreat, we were asked, it was a breakthrough retreat, and we were asked to make some kind of commitment toward eliminating the obstacles that were keeping us from moving to our next spiritual step. And I had just come to the conclusion that the only thing that was holding me up from moving to my next spiritual step was my relationship to money and prosperity, that it had become so challenging that I was letting it stop me from doing many things that I felt like I really should be doing and wanted to do, and that would make my life just much happier. And so I made a commitment, and that commitment was a big one for me. Over the last few years, I have experienced the growth of a lot of debt as I went through, like all of us have, several recessions, some eliminations of jobs, and some things that I never would have chosen some places I never would have chosen to put myself. And so I made a commitment to eliminate all of my debt within 3 years. That was last year. When the pandemic hit, all the extra work I was doing to pay down debt, which I had started and was having some good success, kind of went away because that work that I had, the extra work I've been doing disappeared. And I thought, well, I guess I just have to give up that goal. But you know what? When you set an intention and you really mean it and you're really clear about it, it has a way of just happening anyway, even if you haven't a clue how that's going to work. And so I can just say right before Thanksgiving, I was able to tap into the equity in my home, which I did manage to pay off right before the pandemic. I was able to tap into the equity without causing any other excess payments, and I paid off all of my debt. So the first time in really about 20 years, I am debt free. And I want you to know that was a miracle. There was no way I could see forward that that was going to happen, but there was a way. It was a really great way, and it freed me up now to move forward and do the things that I have been wanting to do for a while. So I'm just here to tell you that even if you think that these kinds of prosperity miracles can't happen to you, they can. We don't really need to know exactly how. We just need to put ourselves in the space where spirit can work in our lives and just know that there's always a way to be prosperous. Always. It's always out there and on its way to you. So the search for prosperity, as I said, is an inner adventure. No matter what we believe to be true as a spiritual concept relative to abundance, it's a journey. Sometimes it takes a lifetime to land where you want to go, but it's worth the trip. And the freedom to be had by adopting the principle of sufficiency is well worth the hills and valleys. We just touched on the surface today of what Lynn Twist's concept of sufficiency is, and it's an amazing way to look at the world. I believe one that would be of great benefit as you move on from here and especially into this new year and this year of hope where we are looking forward to things getting back to some kind of normalcy. So I invite you to explore this surprising truth called sufficiency. I bless you and I wish you wonderful times and much prosperity in the new year to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty Bennett. Such great words. Everyone, let's take a nice deep breath and allow what she has given us to sink into our